thank you to the audience who's listening to this presentation. So I think Google is one of the last ones, and we truly appreciate the time and your patience. I know we're a little bit behind. I'll spend about 20 to 25 minutes kind of giving you a little bit about what Google is doing in the government marketplace, right, that Ron alluded to. So by means of my background, I joined Google about 18 months back. I'm in the Google's public sector. I'm an enterprise architect in the public sector space, covering federal civilian agencies. I also get pulled into some state and local business as well. Before Google, I spent a good couple of decades at Oracle, also working as an enterprise architect. And the reason I'm sharing that story is I'll tell you a little bit when I start talking about Google solutions and how they differ from Oracle, which is astounding for me, right, when I joined the company. But I spent a couple of decades there covering a lot of federal system integrators as well as some state and local business, and selling a lot of the data analytics solutions in that space. And now with Google, definitely the approach is a little bit different. I'm going to highlight some of that. So with that background, next slide, please. Slide number 2. So what are we seeing in the marketplace, right? And this is not just my observation. A lot of this observation is also from the big 3, the Gartners of the world, the Forrester, and all sorts of other companies who do this analysis, right? We see that public sector agencies are definitely under pressure to modernize, based upon this, this pandemic situation we all faced, rising citizen expectations, whether it's, payment processing of some sort, state and local health, vaccinations, and everything else. So a lot of things have definitely changed. And so state agencies, federal agencies are definitely faced with a lot of challenges. And some of those are, how do you manage your high cost of infrastructure and security threats, right? So as you start moving the workloads to the cloud, and we're seeing a lot of that happening, how do you overcome these issues, right? So that's, even though cloud gives you a great way of modernizing your infrastructure, providing on-scale, on-demand scalability models, right? But it brings another set of challenges, mainly around security, right? So how do we address that? And another thing we see is we see 83%, if you look at the numbers that I'm showing there, if you look at that, their success of the future agencies depend on IT modernization, right? And another thing we are hearing constantly, and recently I think it was Gartner who published that, a lot of agencies are now striving to move towards a multi-cloud, also hybrid, where they want to move some workloads to the cloud where it makes sense while running some workloads on-premise, because there are some DoD agencies we work with, they just want complete air-gapped environment. They don't want to move everything to the cloud. But while there's some components of the workload that can go to the cloud. So agencies are gravitating towards this notion of hybrid/multi-cloud to get the best of both worlds, okay? And another area we're seeing is they want all of this while cutting the cost down, right? Because naturally a lot of the agencies are constantly faced with this pressure of reducing the total cost of ownership. Okay? So these are some underlying challenges, and when I talk about this, I'll try to address how we are addressing some of this, okay? Next slide, please. So what does Google Cloud offer you to kind of make a journey towards the cloud, okay? I think we can categorize it into 3 buckets. Number 1, hey, how do you build cloud native workloads? So if you're spinning up new workloads, which oftentimes everybody does, right? You always take on new capabilities, you want to add functionality, add new user experience, and you want to take advantage of cloud native capabilities such as Kubernetes or containers that Google invented and were the founder of, and publish that to the open source community. How do you do that spanning of those new workloads in the cloud? Okay, so that's one. The second area where Google Cloud can help you is taking your existing workloads and doing a move to the cloud as is, okay, also called lift and shift. or migrating existing systems. And oftentimes that's a good first step where you want to start moving some workloads to the cloud, test it out, whether, oftentimes people say, well, I'm working with one of the DoD agency, and they're based in Texas, and both the data centers were in the state of Texas, and with the recent hurricane and other climatic problems, they were down for a couple of days because they got flooded, right? So right now we are working towards setting up their DR system in Google's cloud, and that's a good solution of hybrid that I was talking about, where you will leave your production running on premise and move DR to the cloud. This is where you get best of both worlds. You start moving to the cloud, you start deploying hybrid, and then over time you can make the journey to the cloud completely as you have tested the DR capabilities. Make sure everything is working, right? The user experience, the latency factors, everything has been sorted out. So that's a good way of migrating existing workloads on smaller scale before making a full, jump into the cloud. Okay. And the third area where Google can help you is this whole notion, and the title of today's thing is like how do you innovate? How do you transform the business digitally, right? And if you look at Google, Google is a very innovative company, and that's one of the key differentiators when I came from Oracle. Oracle was very enterprise-centric. Google is very enterprise-centric while bringing innovation, right? And when I talk about innovation, whether it's Kubernetes, TensorFlows, open source, Google is heavily centric in those areas, and they contribute to these open source communities, right? So Google has ways where we innovate through our Google, G Suite or Workspace, our Chromebooks, the whole areas, right? The TensorFlow, Google Search, right? Google has always been an innovative culture where we start building some things and then it kind of pulls people along with it, right? Similar notion we're carrying forward in the cloud where we're going to start delivering capabilities based upon some demand we are seeing out from public sector and other agencies, and we start delivering. And I'm going to talk about some solutions we have built just for those reasons that we see, and that we make it repeatable. So it's very easy for you as a consumer to take on these proven solutions that deliver a core value from the get-go. Okay. Next slide, please. So this slide says what makes Google Cloud different, right? And so basically, what are our core competency? What are our key differentiators, right? Where is our value as a Google Cloud? This can be summed up into the 5 areas. Number 1, best-in-class security. And I'm going to dig deeper into all of these 5 areas. Number 2, this notion that I talked about, which everybody like Gartner and Forrester have been publishing now, is how we can support workloads in a hybrid multi-cloud fashion. So you're not tied to a single cloud service provider. It's never a good thing, right? You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, because we recently saw what happened with SolarWinds. You don't want to be tied to one cloud provider, thereby, hedging your bets right there. Number 3, where Google is different, is our slew of offerings, not just one product, right? And I can talk about BigQuery all day long that's our analytics engine, which is the top leader in the market space. A recent study done by Forrester, we beat out Snowflake and Redshift and Oracle Exadatas, right? We are the top right quadrant. Why? Because we deliver a fully managed offering in the cloud, which is serverless. So all you have to do as a consumer is start putting the data in, and Google will start managing the analytics engine behind the scenes. So we do all the updates, all the refreshes, all the optimizations, the tuning, right? So we have a whole bunch of offerings such as BigQuery, which fall in this category of no managed or fully managed no ops, right? Where you can dynamically scale workloads. Number 4 area, which truly differentiates us, is this AI and ML. Right? And I've got several examples we could talk about, whether you look at NOAA or USPTO. Recently, we just did some business with GSA and FEMA. They're using a lot of our AI capabilities, whether it's AI using Vision AI, So NOAA can track, hey, ships, as they go out in the oceans, which are rusting and everything else. Or in the case of FEMA and GSA, they're looking at our conversational AI, also called chatbots, right? So you can deliver virtual agents through Google's capabilities, which are built using this AI ML solutions out of the box, right? So a lot of those things are already baked into our product offerings that can deliver a ton of value to you as an end customer. Number 5, where we differentiate, and we have a term inside of Google called googliness, right? Where we always will put the customer first, and we try to deliver the best of Google to our customers, right? What that means is any innovation we are doing at Google, we try to map it out to your requirements to give you a very pleasant experience, right? So that's what it is. It's like, give you the best outcomes out of your requirements by innovating with Google. Google brings a partner with you, and we extend your, basically workforce, right? So that's what we do. Okay. Next slide, please. So let's dig into those 5 elements that I just discussed that makes us different, right? Number 1, best-in-class security. So if you look at Google, and this was another eye-opener for me, right? Google, we have built a lot of, so if you go to search and you do Google, YouTube, and everything else, a lot of the infrastructure that runs behind the scenes is manufactured by Google. It's just that Google is not like Dell or Intel or some of these other providers. If you were to market our own hardware out to the public, I think we'll be one of the largest distributors, right? But the amount of, whether you look at TensorFlow processors or anything else, Google has put a lot of IP into the building the infrastructure, right? That we deliver back as solutions to the customers. We do all the patch management, the upkeep, and everything else, right? So what that means to you is we provide the security elements, right? When it comes to keeping up with the patch set release, making sure that Google's infrastructure, we know of any vulnerabilities, out there, right? Any virus threats, any protection, and we will protect your workloads running in Google's cloud because we are already one step ahead of these programs, right? So we do that. And we also one of the largest privately managed networks. So Google, if you know, we have invested heavily in laying under ocean cables across, all the continents, right? And about 40%, and that was a number that was mind-boggling when I went through my onboarding, was 40% of the internet traffic, global internet traffic, traverses on Google's backbone, right? So if you think about Google Search, YouTube, Google Play, anything like that, all that traffic is traversing on Google's private network. What that means is you never get out or minimally get out to a public internet, thereby you are less exposed to security vulnerabilities, right? Because in Google's private network, we keep you secure. We know that how things need to be managed. So not only the core compute platform, the storage and everything else, but also the networking, we undertake all the guiding principles from a security perspective, okay? And then there are other elements from a data protection perspective, right? Whether it's DLP in identifying any publicly any sensitive data, PII data, right? We automatically redact that sensitive data, right? So there's a lot of the data that flows around. And by default, we're the only cloud provider which encrypts data at rest. So even if there's a compromise of any sort of your workload, let's say, you did not secure something, at least your data, your crown jewel is protected because your data at rest sitting in Google's cloud or one of our storage buckets is always going to be encrypted. So we have this notion called defense in depth, right? Whereby it's not just one thing that's protecting you, it's a facets of multiple things that are protecting your assets. Okay, that's what makes Google the different. Next slide, please. And from a compliance perspective, right, we take on a little different approach than our friends, right, on other cloud service providers. where they offer you GovCloud and everything else, which we also have in forms of Azure Cloud. What we do is we offer you, we FedRAMP ATO all of our cloud services, right? So you have the flexibility of running that cloud service in any region. So you're not limiting to one or two, regions, whereby sometimes, I know we have seen this where, hey, let's say if somebody else is putting a ton of workload into it, you may run out of bandwidth. What we allow you to do is, within the US, for example, there are 5 to 7 regions, and all the regions running all the Google Cloud services get FedRAMP ATO'd. Okay? So that's one difference, is where we FedRAMP all of the Google Cloud services, and there's a whole map on Google Cloud, or cloud.google.com/FedRAMP, or you can just Google the term called Google Services FedRAMP. You'll see all the FedRAMP high, FedRAMP moderate, what services fall in what category, right? So everything is there. And then we also have other stamp of approvals from a compliance perspective, whether it's HIPAA or ISO and everything else. So we take this approach very, very seriously. Okay. Next slide, please. So one example of a state agency is New York City Cyber Command, right? As you can imagine, New York City Cyber Command has got about, this is an organization in this city of New York. Their charter is to manage and protect about 100 city agencies. Okay, covering those 100 city agencies is about 300,000 full-time city employees. Okay. So what they do is they're protecting all their endpoints from cyber attacks of any sort. So what they do is they use Google's portfolio and our solution called Cybersecurity Portfolio Solution to protect themselves, right, from malicious cyber attacks. And what that means is they are ingesting billions of events every day, okay, and they need to process this data in less than 10 milliseconds. So they need to detect a threat in that time period. And the way we can do that is by capturing the data, putting the data into our Google's Chronicle, which is our threat detection engine, along with a BigQuery that I touched upon, which can scale to hundreds of petabytes, right? So behind a lot of our search engine and our Google, YouTube and everything else, it's basically powered by Google's BigQuery. That's how we can deliver search at a very fast speed. Same thing, same engine is deployed by New York City Cyber Command Center, right? So they are entering the data in, all the data is captured, and we look for any threats, and then we kind of map it out to any database that we have, and if there's any detection, then we automatically flag that, right? So you can take an event on that. Okay. So very, very robust. I'm not presenting today, but we have a very scalable reference architecture that we have developed working with New York City that we can share with you if somebody's interested. So please ping me through Ron, and we'll be glad to get engaged with you guys. Okay. Next slide, please. The next area is the hybrid and multi-cloud, right? So I'm presuming you folks heard of Google Anthos, right? Anthos is our platform that delivers that, whether it's hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, right? So what Anthos allows you to do is run your workload inside a container, which runs inside Anthos, and Anthos can be either deployed on-premise, or it can be deployed in Microsoft's Azure cloud or Amazon's cloud or Google Cloud, right? This is what allows us the flexibility to run your workload where it makes sense and manage them through one console or one control plane, right? So if you have workloads, for example, running on-premise, but then you also have some components of the workloads running in GCP, which is the Google's cloud platform, and you want one single pane of glass across all these different assets, that's what Anthos does, right? So there's Anthos Mesh, and there is the Istios Mesh that we provide, which is an open source engine that we have delivered out. But there's a console whereby you can see how your workloads are behaving spanned across multiple data centers, right? So that's what it does. What that means is, because Anthos is running containerized workload, you are deploying a very open platform. And we use this notion called write once, run anywhere, right? So you deploy these applications, containerized applications, which can run anywhere, right? You never have to rewrite those applications. And you can move them around very quickly, so you're not bogged down or you're not locked into a single vendor, right? That's the advantage of using Anthos platform, is by you can move your workloads very dynamically across various data centers of your choosing. So that's, and then, as I mentioned, Anthos is built upon Kubernetes, which is the foundation of containers. Right? It's a good way of managing containers, because that's what Kubernetes does. The Google Kubernetes engine. It gives you a way to scalably manage lots of little containers, so you don't have to worry about the upkeep of that. That's what Google Kubernetes engine does, and that Kubernetes engine runs inside Anthos, which then gets deployed across any data center, on-prem to cloud and so forth. Okay. So that's available as well. Next slide, please. So as you can see, Anthos is the platform that runs in all major cloud providers and allows you to run your workloads, which are running in Kubernetes, and you can deploy them anywhere. Okay, that's the fundamental architecture. And what we are also doing is, for folks who follow Anthos, you may have heard of a new announcement we made, which is going to GA very, very soon. We just released something called BigQuery Omni. BigQuery Omni is a way to do federated data management, right? So you can have databases sitting in, let's say, for example, Amazon S3 bucket. You may have data sitting in your on-premise storage of NetApp or EMC of some sort. You may have data sitting in Google's cloud. BigQuery Omni will allow you to federate and run queries across all these data elements without have to move the data ever, right? So that's advantage. So you keep a single copy of the data, and as we start scaling, we are working with a lot of agencies where they have petabytes of data, and some of the data sits on-prem, and over time it will move to the cloud, or some may sit in Amazon because a lot of the data sits in S3 bucket. But yet they want to run workloads at Google as well, without having to move the Amazon data or on-prem data. This is the way we can do that. So BigQuery Omni runs inside Anthos, and it allows you to run it anywhere you like it. And that becomes a way to access the data, run the query locally or in that local data center or in the other cloud provider, and pass the results back to the Google Cloud Console, that where we can aggregate the results and pass it back to the user, right? Great way of bringing it all together. Next slide, please. I didn't touch on, I touched on Anthos. We also have another platform called Apigee. Apigee is a technology, a solution that Google acquired. It's been almost like 18 months now. It was acquired December, January of 2019. OpenGov uses Apigee platform, which is an API management platform, very extensively. So if you're extending your workloads and you want to have hooks and integration into other third-party systems, right? And that's what I mean by multi-cloud or this sort of hybrid workload. Apigee is another solution that Google offers, which allow you to kind of connect these multiple disparate application types running on different platforms, right? OpenGov uses that, and OpenGov has got a huge platform. And there's a video, by the way, on YouTube that's available from OpenGov where they talk about how they're running it. But I just wanted to kind of highlight that, where they have reduced their integration time from multiple weeks down to a single day, where they can integrate and pull data elements from different places using Apigee platform. Okay. Next slide, please. The next area, which I touched upon earlier briefly, where it differentiates Google, is this whole notion of fully managed no ops or automatic operations, right? This allows you to run workloads in the cloud without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. So think of software as a service, and you probably used, you may have used Office 365, or you're using, Google's Workspace, or you're using Salesforce, right? Same idea, but now it's kind of, we take that idea of SaaS applications where you do not have to worry about, hey, what is the database underneath that? Or what is the storage or infrastructure, right? All that is the responsibility of that SaaS provider. Same idea, except we offer that for some custom workloads that you may want to run, right? So I use example of BigQuery, right? And you have Kubernetes. We have App Engine where you want to deploy applications without having to worry about managing anything running underneath that. That's what Google offers you, right? So you can manage your workloads, focus on the application logic, right, that you want to bring on, and not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure at all, or the platform that it's running on. We take care of that for you. Okay? We do that at scale, at the scale of Google search, right? So that think of that magnitude. So that's a key differentiator for us. Next slide, please. I got to speed up. The next area, which is huge, and I can go on this area for at least a couple of hours, right? We have very, very robust offerings in this whole nation of AI ML, right? The advanced AI ML. Whether you're building, TensorFlow processing based workloads where you can do that, which is again something that Google invented, and we contributed to the open source, where you can, build these models that you can iterate upon, right? You can kind of make them smarter over a period of time, leveraging, very high intensive power processors, right? GPUs, CPUs, right? Very applicable in the whole healthcare space, right? Whether it's, genome mapping, or whether it's looking for patterns in data of any kind, right? It's a great way of educating these models, and they become self-learning, right? So that's that. And we have APIs. We offer you a whole gamut. Again, a slide that a solution that I can spend at least a couple of hours. We have a whole breadth of offering this AI ML space, where we offer you platform, where we offer you APIs that you can build upon and you can call, and we offer you solutions, right? Solutions such as conversational AI. We have talent AI, right? We have document AI, where we have document parsers built in. For example, if you have some federal government or state government documents and you want to ingest the data, parse out certain data elements, right? And store them and run analytics, all the solutions are already baked in. So a huge thing that we have delivered as part of the AI ML offering. Next slide, please. So National Institute of Aging, they did a Parkinson's study, which involved in extracting, compiling information from 6,500 exomes and connecting about 50 plus research institutes worldwide, right? A lot of sequencing data that they were able to process using our AI/ML platform. So huge amount of data that can be fed into, whether it's BigQuery ML or your own ML engine that you can build on using auto ML capability, right? So that's another area where we can aggregate the data and provide you that analytics on the data. Next slide, please. I'm going to speed up, I think. So I would leave you with this thought. So we talked about the Google differentiators. I touched upon some technology. I didn't want to just focus on very product specific. I wanted to kind of give you guys a highlight of how Google is different. What are we offering to the marketplace that kind of differentiates us, right? So hopefully you get some idea in 20 minutes, right? But what we're also building out is this notion of, based upon customer feedback, is how do we speed up your journey to the cloud? So we're delivering these prepackaged solutions that are made up of a lot of the technology that we talked about, right? Like BigQuery, whether it's App Engine, Kubernetes, everything else. And what we have done, if you move to the next slide, please. We have kind of categorized those solutions in multiple areas. So for example, we have solutions in the area of cybersecurity platform, right? I touched upon New York City Cyber Command Center. So we have used their model as the baseline to iterate upon and to give you a very proven out best practice solution, right? That's one area. Next area is this whole notion of education and workforce productivity. So if you have state-run institutions, classrooms, right, whether it's virtual or on, or in school classrooms, how do you deliver the best, best experience to these end users, right? So that's another thing we are building on using a lot of our technologies, such as dashboards or APIs or Google Workspace. Okay. The next solution area is transportation, where with COVID, there was a launch by state of Colorado and state of Utah, where they could not service their citizens because everything was shut down, and they wanted virtual DMV, right? So we can renew licenses and everything else. So that allowed us to kind of develop these solutions in the area of transportation, whether it's DMV, analytical platform, snow and traffic management, right? Transit reopening, whether it's, the DC Metro and so forth. So all that stuff is built on a platform, which is a combination of technologies. And we have iterated upon that based upon customer feedback. We have customer advisory panels where we oftentimes meet, and I think I would love to invite you guys to some of that. We meet every Friday, right? Where you hear from other state agencies. We call it Cloud Connect or Public Sector Cloud Connect. That's a community of users where we share with each other what our learnings are, and we incorporate those ideas coming from you into our solution offerings. Okay, that's area. And then public health, right? COVID vaccination, right? The whole sentimental analysis, opioid response. So we have these prepackaged solutions based upon some requirements we're seeing out there, and we constantly deliver new solutions as the market adopts, right, to the new conditions. So just something to keep in mind. And if you go to the next slide, we have an ecosystem of our partners who also bring a ton of value add services to these solutions, right? I'm just highlighting, a few examples, but we have these partners who have taken Google's capabilities and even further provided more enhancements to it based upon the agency requirements, right? I'm working with SEC right now, working with a couple of other agencies where we've brought in people such as Data Society, one of our key partners, where they have this, very intelligent engine built upon where you can look for money laundering or fraud detection, right? So if Google doesn't have it, we definitely have a partner who may deliver that value add services. So that's the notion about best of breed. Okay, next slide, please. So just to wrap it up, again, we talked about how Google can help you with your journey to the cloud, right? It's never one size fits all in my mind because everybody has a different need, right? And the idea is how we can work with you as end customer, whether it's by means of some discovery workshop, right? Or doing some workload assessment to give you some hypothetical, like a value proposition, whether, hey, we are able to deliver this better performance at a lower, time to market, and a lower cost point, right? So we can deliver some of those ideas, and then we can also do pilots and POCs to help you understand the value that Google Cloud can bring. So these are a couple of different ways we can start your journey and enable you to adopt Google's cloud.